Join us today on Beyond the Lair, where we speak with Chief Ian Campbell, Holic from the Squamish Nation, about Reconcili-action, Indigenous advancement, and working collectively together towards success. Welcome to Beyond the Lair. We have an esteemed guest today with us, Chief Ian Campbell from the Squamish Nation, Holic. My name is Gina Jackson Montgomery. I am a proud member of the Seashell Nation, and my traditional name is Sitassi. I'm really happy to be here today with you. I'd like to introduce my co-host.
My name is Dean Montgomery. I am a Cree Métis from Saskatchewan, and it's great to be here with the two of you. And I just wanted to say that the first time I had met Chief Ian, he was speaking in Seashell, and I didn't know you at that time. So it's serendipitous.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Looks like you brought us together in a weird way.
That's right.
So we can thank you and thank you.
Well, I'm very proud of both of you for, you're a lovely couple, and I'm very proud of the work you guys do. And thanks for having me today.
Beautiful. It's so good to have you. Can you introduce yourself as you would to who you are today? And then we're going to head back in time a little bit and talk about what it was like to be you as a child and your upbringing and your mentors and becoming a young leader. So if you can just introduce yourself.
Sure. So thank you again. Neitla ans Holic. My ancestral name is Holic. Sukyo Siam Quinsnas. My chieftain name is Sukyo. I'm a hereditary chief from the Squamish Nation. My lineage is from the Squamish and Musqueam people. I served 16 years as an elected official for Squamish and 23 years as one of our lead negotiators in Intergov. Being in politics, I call it recreational suffering. It's nice to be out of politics, be a civilian now, and, being a proud father. I have a little one at home, another one coming, and it's nice. It's a good time, so... Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Can't believe you were negotiating when you were 6.
Yes. This is why we love video, because people can see how handsome and young you are still. And tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you grew up and what was your inspiration to lead?
Yeah, for sure. Very honored that I was raised by my late grandparents, June and Lawrence Baker. Me and my sister... we're immersed in our language, in the Squamish Snachum, the Squamish language, right from a young age. My grandfather went to residential school in Seashell, and we're fortunate that he retained the culture and the traditions. He was a ritualist. We traveled to longhouses throughout the Salish Sea. He brought us up to the mountains, into the territory from a very young age, immersing us in hunting and fishing and the spirituality of our Coast Salish people. And that really shaped me and led me to uphold the integrity of those teachings of our Snu'ayas from not only my grandparents, but also a number of other elders who are now passed on that I had the opportunity to sit with. The late Dominic Point in Musqueam, the late Lillian Pitawanakwat is a Anishinaabe elder from Birch Island, and others. That really inspired me to draw forward our traditional knowledge and find new and exciting ways to apply it in a modern context.
Nice. You've had many inspirational mentors in your life. How old were you when you got into politics? And were you work? I know we talked to Hey Nicholas from the Squamish Nation on our last podcast, and we talked about her influence with sport. So what is it that has driven you to be that community leader and player? Did you play a lot of sports during when you were young? And how did that segue into going into politics?
Yeah, I definitely grew up playing skechwat, which is lacrosse. And, it was nice to grow up knowing that that's one of our traditional games. Being from the Baker family, that was a big part of our legacy. My grandfather was a lacrosse player, and he always talked highly of him and his brothers, being in lacrosse culture and canoeing and, just that holistic kind of taking care of yourself, your body, your mind, your spirit, your emotions. That really led me to sort of play sports throughout my childhood, but it was really the culture that stood out for me. Learning the language as I became an adolescent, I really thought that it was prevalent, that all my peers were learning the same information, that it was common knowledge. And I soon realized that I was very fortunate to learn our history, our mythology, our language, our ceremonies as a youth. That led me to pick up the drum and start learning a lot of our traditional songs and start interfacing with other nations to start learning their songs and sharing, which led me to travel abroad to well over 40 countries now, where I've interfaced with so many other cultures and learning from each other's stories and our histories. Transitioning into a post-colonial era really, led me to politics in how I could be of service to our community, but also the succession and grooming to be a hereditary chief from my late grandfather kind of selected me as one of the grandchildren to then groom me. So that was a big honor as well to receive the chieftainship at 22. I was still in my terrible twos, so it was a lot of responsibility to try and accept, the blanket that was put on me to wear this responsibility, ultimately to pass that on to the next generation. I really feel like a relay runner, that I accept that baton, do the best I can with the tools I have, ultimately to pass that on to the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, you're such a polished speaker. I've seen you speak. I mean, you do it for a living, so of course you are. But I mean, was it your grandfather that taught you that? Was it the knowledge that taught you that? Where did you get so much comfort and enjoyment in it?
Well, through high school, I certainly started to hone in on the opportunity, to be put forward to public speak. I accepted that challenge, but when I graduated from high school, I got accepted into heavy-duty mechanics and welding, and I wanted to go into trades and travel and work on projects. But I also got offered an all-expense trip to Chile on a youth exchange to live amongst the Mapuche. And I thought, go to school, pull wrenches, or go on a trip to South America. And it wasn't a hard decision. I'm like, I'm out of here. And I went to Chile, and it was 2 years after the Pinochet dictatorship, so it was still heavily militarized. First night in Santiago, kind of put against the wall with a gun to our heads. We're like, wow, like stark contrast to the oppression of the people down there. And that really made me think about the context of Canada, context of oppression, colonialism. When I returned from Chile, it changed the whole direction of my life. So I started moving towards youth engagement, working with creating programs for our young people to immerse them in the history and the culture, getting them back out on the land, which then ultimately led me to politics, where Chief Gibby Jacob brought me in back in the 1900s in 1999 to work on our land use plan and bring that sort of traditional knowledge to our governance process.
Nice. What year were you in Chile?
That was back in 92.
Okay.
So it was, seems like a life, over 20 pounds ago or 20 years ago for me, but definitely shaped my life as a youth to travel somewhere. And, coincidentally, I have some Chilean ancestry from 6 generations back. Benjamin Cordecido married one of our Squamish matriarchs, and that's part of my father's line. Our lineage. I didn't know that when I went to Chile. It's like, it would have been nice if my family told me. I would have been able to, go and explore a little bit further and meet some of the relatives. But just having that connection really makes us feel like we're in this together.
Oh, yeah. I spent some time down there, but it was being very selfish and just surfing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. No gun to her head.
No. Oh.
Well, maybe. So for our listeners, there are different governance and protocols, and we're not too far away from each other. In fact, our families of Squamish and Sechelt intertwine, but we have an elected chief, right? So it's very democratic in a lot of different nations. It's interesting, in some nations, we have different governance, we have different protocols. Our nations are intertwined, Squamish and Sechelt, quite closely, and share many cousins. But we have an elected chief that, and a lot of chief and council, they elect their chief democratically, whether it's a 2, 3, or 4-year period. Can you maybe explain to the listeners how Squamish is different and the story behind hereditary chiefs and how that comes about?
Yeah, excellent question. So as a hereditary chief, it's really our lineage through our ancestral name. So having the chieftain named Sukyo really ties me to the village of Kakelchen, which is on the west side of Howe Sound. It was my grandfather's father, my great-grandfather, who was a signatory to our amalgamation just over 100 years ago in 1923, where our hereditary chiefs collectively formed the Squamish Nation. That was in response to the influx of settlers coming into our territories, really buying up lands without our consent, without compensation, and of course, without legal recourse. We, under the Indian Act, we really couldn't defend ourselves from the influx of settlers. So the foresight of, our leaders then was to unify. And it was the hereditary chiefs that represented their families through our ancestral names that had that vision for the Squamish people. We followed our hereditary system until 1981. Then we did a referendum where we switched from a hereditary system of governance to a 4-year custom election. That's a bit of a hybrid in Canada because the custom election really allowed us to define for ourselves what kind of style of governance we want for the Squamish people. That's in contrast to the Indian Act, which has imposed sort of the chief and council system, which really is only responsible for on-reserve administration. It's really not conducive to territorial under the federal sort of policy. If it was territorial, the feds would be conceding that the entirety is Indigenous land and title. Instead, they wanted to reduce us and marginalize us to the reserves. For Squamish, our reserves are 0.3% of our territory, and the Indian Act attempted to marginalize us and sort of impose this system of governance, but Squamish opted a different route that we still follow today with our elected system. So I served 16 years, 4 consecutive terms as an elected official, but continued to be a hereditary chief. So I strongly believe that the elected body is really responsible for the administration of programs and services amongst all 4,000 members of Squamish people. And the hereditary chiefs really continue to have title on behalf of our families. The title is collective amongst all of our people, and the hereditary chiefs become sort of that focal point on behalf of our families to then uphold the integrity of Aboriginal title, which is unceded.
No, that is amazing. And I know when you were on Chief and Council, it was still 2010. And 2010 was a really big year for Vancouver because it really was welcoming the world to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. And you were a big part of that welcoming committee. And can you talk about that?
Yeah, 2010 was definitely an awesome time to be Indigenous. It really showcased to the world that we're not a vanished race. Erasure has been the modus operandi of colonialism to try and eradicate our entire language and culture. So 2010 involvement as the 4 host First Nations really wasn't out of moral goodwill by any level of government. It's because we exercised leverage. We threatened to go ballistic and shut the whole thing down at the bid process, which significantly gave us leverage to then say, what do we want if the games are going to be held within our shared territories? It really allowed us to develop protocol agreements amongst our neighboring nations who have been segregated under the Indian Act to really unify the nations. But I also had the great fortune of working on the opening ceremonies to invite Indigenous youth from coast to coast to coast to participate in the opening ceremonies. When we invited the youth, it was under the guise that they'd be here for a youth conference. Once they arrived, we got them to sign NDAs and say, by the way, you're going to be in the opening ceremonies of the 2010 Winter Olympics. And that was what we called Operation Shock and Awe, to really show the world again, that Indigenous people are still here. Everywhere I travel in the world, I tell people I'm Native. They look at me, blink, blink. It's not until I do the big, ooh, then they go, you're Indian, right?
Yeah.
So there's a preconceived image that the world has of us due to sort of Hollywood image. And the 2010 Olympics allowed us to really break that stereotype and show that we're still here.
Wow.
But what was important stemming from the 2010 Olympics was the opportunity to monetize our relationships, to really then develop protocol agreements to jointly negotiate and collaborate on acquisition of lands and development and ongoing concern of our economy.
Wow, that's such a cool story. So the kids didn't know, but I mean, who knew? Who knew that you were doing that?
Yeah, there was only a handful of us that were involved in the negotiations to create that space. And then when we invited folks to come out, of course, we gave, some criteria that, their youth that are involved in their community, their traditions and post-secondary or different leadership roles that they're playing, and that they'd bring their regalia with them.
Oh, that's amazing.
To add to that, when we met with VANOC, they wanted to put their own theatrical sort of designers to dress our youth in this sort of perpetuate a Pocahontas kind of look. It was one of the only opportunities in my career where I used the word preposterous. I'm like, this is preposterous. And I stormed out of the room and threw a big fit saying, there's no way we're going to subject our kids to this kind of perpetuate this image. We wanted to dress our youth in 100% of our own authentic kind of regalias and represent the diversity of our nations across the country.
Oh, yeah. I remember watching the opening ceremonies vividly still, but we should watch it again because it was amazing.
Yes.
It was such a paradigm shift for Indigenous people in general. Because prior to 2010, I don't ever remember going to an event, going to a school and having land acknowledgements. I don't remember being so proud to be Indigenous. Not that I've not always been, because I've always been, and I obviously share my cultures with being a Canadian and a settler, but also having the honor of being a Sechelt Nation member, both which I'm proud to be. But I just know that little kids from all over Canada that are Indigenous felt proud. They felt pride, and that we were showcased, and not in a negative way where there's stereotypes or barriers that we have to go through. And it was really elevated. And to know that behind the scenes, it's so interesting to hear that story, because knowing behind the scenes how hard and how strongly you fought with your group to make sure that things were authentic and it was honorable and elevated. So thank you for that. It's such an interesting story to hear.
It is.
What did you think about the closing ceremonies? What did you think about the whole experience? Was it everything that you thought it was going to be? Do you think that if we do have another Olympics in Vancouver, which maybe we see in this lifetime, how things could be improved, or how you think that you've broken the ceiling to make things better?
Yeah, I think there's a long road ahead of us in order to actualize sort of Reconcili-action. I think the 2010 was an opportunity to sort of break some of the stereotypes, but then how we move forward, around reconciliation really matters. The value proposition to Canadians is not charity or goodwill to Indigenous peoples. It's really collaborative. How do we come together and merge Western ways of doing along with Indigenous epistemologies? And I think if we're going to host again the world in our territories, it really has to be around economic reconciliation. And that's something that, I believe strongly in mobilizing our members within our nations across this country to be engaged in contract and procurement. The youth entrepreneurialism that the two of you are championing is something that I strongly support. And think the next 10, 15 years, we're going to see metrics of success as we see our young people participate in bigger and better ways. So 2010 was an iteration of growth in a trajectory. It's not a straight line. There'll be peaks and valleys along the way, that there's going to be challenges. But seeing each generation of our families progress, from our parents' era, from our grandparents' era, who were subject to just blatant systemic racism, hopefully that'll change, and we'll be able to mature as a society as we host the world within our territories in the future.
For sure. And I think everyone wants to be a part of something and a part of belonging. And we were talking to Nicholas about this, about cultural appropriation and wearing items if you're non-Indigenous, and attending events, and how to be respectful and what the protocols are. And I think we set each other up for mutual success when we provide opportunities. And I know with the Squamish Nation, I talk about how outstanding your time was as chief and council, participating in that, but also with the rights and title, with working with the great Chief Bill Williams, also a hereditary chief, and knowing projects that were just a whisper, like wood fiber. like Sanok. Like, can you tell us about some of the projects and some of the interesting things that you work on that now is coming into fruition, and you can, such a young person still, to be able to see some of these things that you've worked on?
Yeah, it's been an honor to be in a negotiating role for over 20 years. And, I feel like I can't take credit for the success that we're achieving. It's been generations of effort. We look to the initial contact with European cultures here in the late 1700s, all the way through the 1800s was very dynamic. Intermarriages between settlers and Indigenous women really set the foundation to allow the burgeoning economy to continue to access all sorts of sectors that Canadians enjoy today. I think that's often forgotten in the Canadian narrative, that it's really those relationships. So, being involved in a lot of, sort of volume and magnitude of projects, I'm grateful, because as a negotiator, I felt, okay, we're creating space, but my anxiety was always who's going to occupy the field if we're not mobilizing our youth and our young leaders to then plug into these projects, to see themselves reflected. So it's really not business for the sake of business, but really business that meets our metrics, that meets our values. So the land use planning was integral to create a vision. And then from that, we did 9 clean energy projects. We did the acquisition of Tree Farm License 38. We got involved in ski hill development with Whistler Blackcomb. Then we did our own environmental assessment of wood fiber LNG, recognizing the value of our lands to access tidewater and get product to international markets. That will never diminish. The value of our lands in the West Coast here will only increase exponentially. So the opportunity to participate in the growth was very important to us to create that path. With the wood fiber, that was in direct sort of contrast to Trans Mountain, which, I was one of the interveners on behalf of the Squamish in the National Energy Board process. And we were completely dismayed at the lack of engagement of the federal government to just check boxes, transactional, to say, well, we met with you, we heard what you said, without any real consideration or further analysis of our concerns. So we didn't want to go cap in hand to some other level of government and say, please consider our interests. We wanted to approach it in a different way. So Squamish exercised their jurisdiction, their authority, their governance on projects like wood fiber, where we affected design changes. We got involved in marine use planning. Once our conditions were met, we then signed a substantive impact benefit agreement that provides economic opportunities for our members for the life of the project.
Yeah, I mean, it really is groundbreaking. Just the value of the land alone, in the territory in Vancouver, it really has set a standard that's really moving east now, right? Because we know the east has been a little bit further behind in their Reconcili-action. Gene and I fortunately get to work there and try to help out and get involved with the nations there and major projects. But you really did set a standard in Silcoteen and some of these other groundbreaking ones, right? Wonderful.
No, absolutely. We wanted to raise the bar, and the opportunity to position the Squamish as a regulator on a major industrial project is the first of its kind that we're aware of in Canada with a non-treaty group, and that was really important. But then the onus falls back on the nation. Once we create that space, we then have to restructure accordingly. So the need to develop our development corporations, to define the roles and responsibility between our government and our economic arms and then that of our citizens is an ongoing concern. And I see that as kind of a startup. We're on a curve right now, but I hope to see, a lot more success in the coming years.
I'd love to hear in your words, because you're so succinct and articulate, the explanation, or to our listeners, to explain what the difference is between treaty and non-treaty and why there is a difference. How would you put that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions I have for Canadians is, do Canadians consider themselves a treaty person? When you ask a Canadian that, they'll look at you, blink, like, what the hell are you talking about? And really, Canada wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for the numbered historic treaties across the country that allowed Western expansion. As early as 1605, with Eastern Canada nations interfacing with French and English, that was really the foundation. Once Western expansion reached our territories in 1791 with the Spaniard Narvaez, Vancouver in 92, it was quite a bit later compared to the Eastern context. So, when we looked at treaty with our late chief, Joe Mathias, who was instrumental in modern treaty making, we recognized that the Crown was acting as though they're offering us a 5% monetary and real estate transaction. We said, that means we're going to give up 95% of our territory for perpetuity with no future legal recourse. So, you have to ask yourself, who on earth would accept 5 cents on the dollar when you live in such a beautiful area that's worth trillions and trillions of dollars in future economic development? So there's no way that the treaty for us was feasible. That wasn't the case for other treaties in modern treaty in BC, which, I certainly support others that have exercised, Tla'amin and Huayet, and of course Tsawwassen and Nishka. There's many others that have occupied the field when it comes to modern treaty. But for Squamish, it really wasn't something that we can entertain. So we had to look at what other alternatives do you have. If it's not treaty, then of course litigation. We became very litigious, has yielded great results. With over 225 court cases at the Supreme Court of Canada, including Tsilcotin, that has reaffirmed title to our territory was not extinguished when BC joined Confederation. Negotiation has yielded some amazing results. Civil disobedience, which we see continuing to this day, is an option, or complacency. So we certainly have options that we have to weigh.
Great answer. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very good answer. Tell us about Sanok, because Sanok is prime real estate right underneath the Broad Street Bridge in Vancouver. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and the vision, because we know that housing is a challenge for our members, and we're starting to build vertically opposed to horizontally now, and on reserve, off reserve. But tell us a little bit about that project and why it's so important.
Yeah, SNOC is a great project. Again, generations of effort. When I look at preemption of our lands in the 1850s and 60s, huge swaths of our territories were being privatized before BC was even a part of Canada under Confederation. And, that trajectory led to sort of Confederation, then the Indian Act of 1876, which then attempted to marginalize us onto reserves. But by 1900, we were deemed as squatters in our own lands in downtown Vancouver, in Falls Creek, and relegated to the reserves. Again, no legal recourse. We weren't allowed to own fee simple land. We weren't allowed to go to university. There was the banning of the potlatch, the residential schools, which are really internment camps. It's hard to call them schools.
Yeah.
It was very oppressive, like blatant systemic racism. So, our chief Capellino traveled in 1906 to interface with King Edward VII in England to implore the crown, to seek honor in the crown. That failed. Upon return, we were then forcibly removed from Snock in Falls Creek by 1913. This really led to the discussions over the next decade to look at the amalgamation of the Squamish people in response to these the hostility that we were experiencing from what we call interlopers, from the foreign sort of colonial governments coming into our territories. Again, we had no legal recourse until post-1960. So by 1977, we launched court action against the actions like SNOC. We're in sort of court through decades, costing the Squamish Nation tens of millions of dollars to defend ourselves. But we settled outside of court in 2003 with the reclamation of 10.68 acres, additions to reserve, along with $92 million. So that's a pittance of what the lands were worth, or what values have been gained from these lands over the last century and a half. But nonetheless, the return of these lands was integral to the Squamish Nation to then look at, how do we redevelop the lands? It's not our core competency in development. We're the new entrants in the market in a sea of development. So we did an RFP through Ernst & Young to then solicit sort of who are the right fit partners for us. We settled with Westbank Development, and now we're doing 6,000 rental units in SNOC, which is on reserve. And one thing that I hear a lot of people saying is, well, why are you doing so much density? Why are you going vertical? It's really the portfolio of land in our territory. We have areas in the north, 50,000 hectares that we protected as pristine wilderness. we do forestry, we do wildlife management, but areas that are conducive for economy, such as downtown Vancouver, we're going to do density because the demand will never diminish. We're going to use that as our ATM machine to generate significant revenues that are into billions of dollars to then reinvest into our communities, taking care of language, elders, youth programs, housing, health, a lot of things that Ottawa will just never pay for.
No, and some of the arguments that I've heard, against that are, as you would say, they're ludicrous.
Yeah.
Of course, you're going to do highest and best use of what the nation can use it for, and it is downtown.
It's quite entertaining because no matter what we do, we're going to get feedback. We have to recognize 1/3 will agree, 1/3 will disagree, 1/3 will be complacent.
Mm-hmm.
The 1/3 that disagree, we have to pay attention because there might be something we missed. We can't pretend we know it all. So we have to solicit feedback. But if it's just rhetoric and it's, the Indians are going to blot out the sun with these towers type thing, it's like, look around you. There's a sea of development, and we're the new entrants in the market that are completely shut out of those sectors for far too long. So now it's our turn, and we're not doing it just for the sake of business. We're going to take those revenues. We're going to be a part of the solution around affordability, transportation, daycare, rental, affordable housing. And we're going to reinvest those monies back into community that's going to benefit the local economy.
100%. So lucky. Squamish is just so lucky to have for people like yourself, like the great late Chief Joe Mathias, like the Gibby Jacobs, like the Chief Bill Williams, and the people have really sat at the economic development table, seeing the future and the visions of not just this next 7 generations, but more. So I really appreciate that and where that's going. There are nations that are near Squamish, right? We shared territories and ceded territories. So Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish working together instead of interfighting, which is exactly what colonialism will allow us to do because that stops progression. Can you tell us about the relationship between the MST, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, or Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and how you're working together to really elevate each other's nations and working on siloed projects, but also working on projects together?
Yeah, definitely. That's, the MST sort of collaboration is one of the biggest things I'm proud of in my career to be a part of. For when I first came into the Squamish Nation, I'm half Musqueam, I'm half Squamish. It was very disheartening to see the way the three nations, the lateral violence amongst ourselves, where we were in a competition over scarcity resources. Because of the Indian Act, we were segregated and we were relegated to the small reserves. For years we were fighting over any dispositions of lands that are claimed by the Crown. There's no such thing as Crown land. They're lands claimed by the Crown within our shared territories. So when the feds or the province would sell parcels such as Sinclair Centre or Canada Post, the nations would lose and we'd get 100% of nothing because we were always in this constant tug of war saying it's mine, no, it's mine. That was an exercise of futility. I was fortunate. I was doing my MBA at the same time through SFU, and I really wanted to put the business principles back into those relationships to then look at our protocol agreements that weren't intended to solve all issues between the nations. It was a narrow scope to simply look at dispositions of lands claimed by the Crown within our shared territories. When we overlay our maps, our statement of intent in the treaty process, there's a clear, defined shared territory of overlap. We said that'll become the shared territory where we're going to participate 33.3% each, equal partners. That was a hard sell back to our members and our leadership. Squamish is the biggest per capita out of the three nations. So they said, why are you giving equal value to the other nations? We said, because we can equally choke each other out. If it goes litigation, we'll stall it out and we'll get 100% of nothing. So, once we reframed that relationship to move beyond competition to a place of collaboration, we were then able to jointly negotiate the acquisition of 120 acres of fee simple in Vancouver, which is valued at about $5 billion in today's value. When we go through the rezoning and phasing and create density, that value will exponentially increase over the coming decades. That was a tangible example of how to work together in strength and unity, which brings mutual value to all parties.
No, that's such an excellent answer. And I always think if we're unified, then nothing can stop us. But if we're interfighting, we will never get anywhere. And that is the expectation and hope in a lot of ways. Excellent. Can you you have something interesting coming up besides your land acknowledgements and your keynotes and your panels and your amazing public speaking and podcast interviews and educational platforms. You also are working in land development. You're working on industrial projects right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've been. It's been nice to be a civilian again, to be a recovering politician, and just kind of pick and choose a few projects to get involved in, along with some business opportunities to partner and collaborate on projects that have purpose and profit. That really allow us to apply sort of traditional knowledge. So the land development side has been exciting to me because I've been working with different developers to look at really the location. Where are they building? The statement of significance, whether it's the mythology, the ecology, the history, that then becomes a foundation to then draw upon when we're repurposing land for whether it's housing or mixed use, to then draw from the stories to then shape kind of the whole building envelope, the naming, the artisans that can come in, the collaboration with neighbors around development projects, and ultimately with the city regulatory process, how we're moving the pendulum around visible presence, countering erasure. These have all been exciting ways to bring in members of our communities to participate in projects with partners who meet our values and share a common vision. That's something that hasn't been done before in Vancouver. We see a lot of development that have had zero regard for place. People act as though this is a free and vacant land under terra nullius or doctrine of discovery. Look at this great new city. It's a young city, and the mountains and the ocean, and they have zero regard for thousands of years of history of our families living here. This is our home. So it's time to change that, not by putting a gun to someone's head and saying you must respect our history, but by providing value. And that value is something that I feel is transformative. It's going to change who and what we are as a society here in Vancouver. Little by little, each project matters.
Yeah, and we're seeing that adopted, right? It's the difference, the change that's happened in, say, 20 years when you started to where we are today.
Yes.
It's night and day. It's great.
And that brings us to, how important is it for the youth to pay attention, to get educated, and what opportunities do they have now that we didn't have that they should start listening to and start taking advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, I have tremendous hope and optimism and confidence in our youth. We have a lot of talent within our nations. And, I really hope that our youth find mentors the way that we have. No one succeeds without someone kicking them in the butt or, encouraging them and calling them on their BS at times. I had an elder that would just call me out of the blue and give me heck. And I'm like, what do you have, a hidden camera here? Like, how do you know, right? But you can't lie to the elders. They're wise. They've been through life experience. And with our youth, I really hope that they seek out mentors who have experience, because youth have the energy and the raw sort of talent that needs to be harnessed and focused so that they're going to see themselves as succession of the ongoing concern of projects over the next coming decades. So the confidence to leave politics is really to pass that baton. And I think that's something that, as a father of young kids, my daughter's in university. My other daughter's is an all-star athlete. And, our boy is learning, he's hunting. He's learning sort of our traditional ways, and you want to pass that knowledge on and hope that they're going to continue to do new and exciting things with it. I have great hope. The post-secondary institutes today, I feel, are a lot more receptive to meet us halfway and acknowledge sort of our ways of knowing, that it's not just assimilating into sort of Western practices. So the youth are bringing a lot of that energy. There's a lot of language revitalization in our young people. I'm concerned that the melody of the language and the pronunciation isn't the same as what I heard from elders who grew up with the language as their first language. Those elders are gone now. So we have to have a lot of patience for our young people and say, it's okay. Like, the language is inevitably going to change and it's going to adjust to our modern environment. So we have to allow for some of those processes to unfold. And I'm very excited though.
It's very interesting. I mean, the whole premise of this show, Beyond the Lair, is to talk about something other. We have a TV show. We have a TV show called The Bear's Lair, and we really wanted to elevate Indigenous entrepreneurs from all over Canada and show that we all share a commonality of core values, which is important in taking care of the land and taking care of our community and respecting our elders and uplifting our youth. And Dean and I have been to, 31 communities now where we teach kids 11 to 18 years old about entrepreneurism, everything from splitting the kids up into groups immediately so that they're not in their comfort zone, because that's not how real life is. And then getting them to choose a business, a name for a business, logo simplicity, target market, startup costs, operational costs, profit, social impact. What does that mean? And really educating kids so that besides a business acumen that they're learning when they're 11, which is when I think I taught your daughter
Yes.
with in 2015, and she was 11 or 12 years old, and now she's in business in university. But just really allowing them to have a voice and allowing them to have that social confidence and eye contact and body language. But most importantly, to have that mentor and to have hope. Because really what we're doing is we're not doing trauma-informed education where we're going in to fix anybody. We're going in to have fun. We're going to slip in some really great soft skills of public speaking and eye contact, and learning how to public speak is really big. But listening to your elders. And I think instead of looking outside to try to find somebody that you can look up to, that's maybe a movie star or a pro athlete or something, but really looking into your own community. What would your advice be to youth to try to find? Because I know as an adult, if a young person asks me to be a mentor or for advice or even needs moments of my time, that it is just given to them. And how do we tell the youth that it's really important to ask?
Yeah, I think empowering our youth voice is definitely essential to for them to know, like, as Squamish, we're only 4,000 members in a sea of 7.5 billion people. So every Squamish person matters, especially youth. Our demographics are 60% under the age of 25. Every one of those young people, we have our pom-pom saying, go. Like, you matter to us and what you do. Like, you're not alone. They're not invisible. And overcoming trauma is something that we're seeing in each of our generations. And I think of my late grandmother, June, who passed during the pandemic, and she was 90. And she would always say, you kids have so much more tools than we had back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. Like, back then, she was subjected to so much just blatant racism through the healthcare system, through judicial, through education. It really didn't matter. They were looked at just as some sort of second-class citizens. And our kids no longer have to accept that colonial mentality that has attempted to dehumanize us over centuries. We can stand up and I think youth, they are leaders now, and they have to recognize that they need to step up and accept that it's not a scary thing, that it doesn't matter what they choose. Try anything and everything. When I pulled wrenches as a youth, I thought that's going to be my career, but it changed. I worked in a whole bunch of different sectors, and all they have to do is go out and try and find mentors and honor each generation. That it's not about blame, shame, and judgment of our past or of what Canada has done to us. It's about learning from that and transformation, looking at our stories. The trickster is in every one of our stories. The trickster is alive and well. The trickster is omnipresent, and the trickster is within each of us. So don't be afraid to make mistakes or ask questions.
Nice.
No, that's amazing. And you have an event coming up. and you have two events coming up. One event is you have a 2-year-old right now, a little boy, Wakaiston,
Yes.
and you also have a daughter that's going to be born May 22nd. We figured out earlier that your daughter is going to be graduating in 2042, which makes me super happy because our son graduates in 2030. So yay. It's nice to know that. What is it like to generationally, because you have a daughter in university and you have that, how does it feel to have children at this part of your life, and how are you different as a father now for the younger ones?
Nice. Well, being a dad again has been absolutely just the best thing in my life. Just seeing his reaction when I walk in the room, it absolutely gives me purpose. And, my older kids, they grew up seeing me in politics and serving our community and taking a lot of abuse at times. It's not an easy job. You get, people following you around and doing things. And they were subjected to a lot of that, wondering why is their dad kind of always traveling and always out in community events and doing this stuff. And, I feel like my next children are going to grow up in an era of business where they're going to see me being more successful in creating, generational wealth for our family. And, that's something that you always hope your kids are going to do better than you, that you're going to give them enough tools to allow them to go and flourish. And, that's not just my own direct children. It's my nieces and my nephews. All the children in our communities are our nieces and nephews. And you just want them to do the best they can. And, we lose young people and it breaks our hearts. We just lost a nephew to the, unfortunately, for different circumstances, and that grieving, amongst the children, they're now healing in better ways. They're not just turning around and going to indulge in partying and all that. They're actually doing ceremony and they're gathering and they're talking about it. And that to me was just so beautiful to see recently, that our youth are embracing the tools, the culture, the support, chin chin stwite in our language, to support each other in healthy ways. That gave me huge encouragement that we're on the right path.
Excellent. And people are going to be able to see you soon. You are a big part of, you are the chair of the IPSS, which is the Indigenous Partnership Success Showcase. This is going to be in Vancouver. This is the third year that we've been out, and that will be June 5th and 6th.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what this conference is about, what the target market, what the crowd is, and why people should attend it?
Yeah, absolutely. So IPSS has been a great, just a venue to come together and tell stories. Everywhere I travel, people learn from stories. They share stories, and in Canada, we can shoot holes all day long through what's not working, and that's not going to serve any purpose. It's really, let's showcase what is working. What are the partnerships within a variety of sectors where nations are involved in projects that meet their values, where different organizations and companies are really coming together to collaborate and to create better outcomes. That's the type of stories that are being shared at IPSS. So it's my third year being involved. I was really honored. I watch a lot of the different nations across the country. A couple of years ago, we had Chief Terry Paul from Membertou First Nations come out and talk about the Clearwater deal they did on the lobster fishery, when we seen, in the media, non-native fishers kind of burning down the warehouses and ramming the boats and of the Mi'kmaq fishers who are exercising their treaty rights. And Chief Paul and his leadership said, we're just going to buy out the licenses and we're going to put everyone back to work, creating stability, creating certainty, not just for Mi'kmaq fishers, but for everyone in the region. And that type of leadership is inspiring to all of us as Canadians. And that's the type of story I want to invite people to come and share and be inspired on what the possibility is of economic reconciliation. And to have fun. We got to put the silly back in reconciliation as well, that it's not all serious. It's really how do we get together and create a vision? And where do we see ourselves by 2050, by 2100? What we do today will someday be traditional. So it's this continuity of tradition that's important for all of us collectively.
Great. And then who's coming? What type of industry, what type of nations? What's it like?
So, initially it was more natural resource based, with Stuart Muir being the founder of the IPSS. Stuart brought me in and we started to sort of expand on, what types of sectors are present. So, it's all sorts. Of course you have the traditional sort of natural resource sectors, but we're going into more IT, more into finance, more into tourism, more into post-secondary. Bringing in a lot of youth and women in leadership this year is really important for me as a chair to really create that space and encourage our team to support our youth, our post-secondary students, to connect them with sectors that are doing the right things, and really start seeing ourselves reflected in corporate Canada. I think for me, the youth and women in leadership this year is going to be absolutely awesome.
Oh, so great.
Can't wait to participate in that. So that's June 5th and 6th. And where's it being held?
So this IPSS is at the Vancouver Convention Center, the new one, the West, Vancouver Convention Center West. So come and check it out. There's always a gala, there's receptions, there's networking. Last year we had Dorothy Grant do a fashion show. And of course, the illustrious Gina did the emceeing. This year we're probably going to do something like a fashion show with some entertaining and DJing with a great menu. So it's going to be fun. During the day, the plenaries, the breakouts, all that kind of stuff. In the evening, more of the fun. So
it really is a great time. And we get to see a lot of old friends and make many, many new friends. And that's what's really exciting about
definitely.
these.
We'll put the silly back in reconciliation.
We need the bell, when people connect and make the deals, ding, 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 because there's a lot of connections that are happening at this
drum.
event.
Definitely.
We need a drum. We need a drum.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it has been really inspiring and such an honor. You're so eloquently spoken, and just a little insight as to who this amazing person is. Chief Ian Campbell, Hollick, thank you for being with us here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you too for the awesome work you guys are doing. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Lair. You can please follow us, download this episode, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok, and live your dream. Find your purpose.